Family laughed at a single mom's worthless painting until her dog revealed its shocking secret. She thought it was just an old, ugly picture hanging on her wall, until her loyal dog wouldn't stop barking at it. And when the frame finally cracked open, what she found hidden inside wasn't just strange, it was life-changing. A mysterious map, an abandoned house on a lonely island, and letters from a soldier who vanished in the war, holding secrets no one was ever meant to find. But as she digs deeper, the truth doesn't just connect her to the past, it puts her future, her family, and everything she believes at risk. What was really hidden in that painting? And why did her grandmother keep this secret buried for so long? Let me know in the comments which city or country you're listening from. If you like stories that connect us, don't forget to subscribe before you leave. The autumn evening cast long shadows through Rachel's modest living room as she balanced carefully on a stepladder, positioning the old seascape painting above her brick fireplace mantel. The wooden frame was weathered, its gilded edges dulled by time, but to Rachel, it glowed with memories of her grandmother's home. "Mom, seriously?" Her teenage son glanced up from his math homework spread across the coffee table. "That thing is so ancient." He wrinkled his nose, pencil pausing mid-equation. Rachel adjusted the frame one final time. "It's not about how it looks, honey. This painting hung in Grandma's living room for 40 years. Every Christmas, every family gathering, it was always there watching over us." The doorbell chimed, and Loki, her golden retriever, trotted to the entrance, tail wagging. Rachel heard her sister's distinctive laugh before she even opened the door. "Rachel, darling." Her sister breezed in, designer purse swinging, her husband trailing behind with his usual quiet demeanor. "We were in the neighborhood and thought we'd—" "Oh my goodness." She stopped short, staring at the painting. "Please tell me that's not what I think it is." "Hello to you too," Rachel said, climbing down from the ladder. "And yes, it's Grandma's seascape." Her sister's perfectly painted lips twisted into a smirk. "You actually hung that thing? In your living room? Where else would I put it? The garbage?" Her sister laughed, perching on the arm of the sofa. "Or maybe a yard sale, though I doubt anyone would pay even $1 for it." Rachel's son ducked his head, pretending to focus on his homework, but his ears had turned pink. Her brother-in-law wandered closer to the painting, hands in his pockets. "It's something?" he offered diplomatically, though his mouth twitched with poorly concealed amusement. "The frame alone probably has termites," her sister added, wrinkling her nose. "And look at those colors. Was the artist colorblind? The water looks more like pea soup than ocean." Rachel felt her cheeks grow warm, but kept her voice steady. "It's not about the artistic value. Grandma loved this painting. She used to tell me stories about how it reminded her of the beach where she met Grandpa." "Oh, please." Her sister rolled her eyes. "She probably bought it at a garage sale herself." "You're so sentimental sometimes, Rachel. It's embarrassing." Loki patted over to Rachel, pressing against her legs as if sensing her distress. She scratched behind his ears, grateful for the silent support. "I remember how she used to sit in her rocking chair, looking at this painting for hours," Rachel continued softly. "She said it brought her peace, especially after Grandpa passed away." "Well, it's bringing me a headache," her sister declared. "Honestly, Rachel, you need to move on. Stop living in the past with worthless old junk." Her brother-in-law cleared his throat. "It does make the room look a bit dated." Rachel straightened her shoulders. "This is my home and I'll decorate it how I choose. The painting stays." "Your funeral," her sister sang, standing up. "Though I suppose it matches the rest of your distinctive style." Her eyes swept dismissively over Rachel's secondhand furniture and craft fair decorations. "We should go, dear. We have that dinner reservation." After they left, Rachel sank onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. Her son looked up from his homework, expression uncertain. "Mom, you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetie." She managed a smile. "Sometimes your aunt can be a bit mean," he suggested. "Outspoken," Rachel corrected, though she appreciated his loyalty. A strange sound drew their attention. Loki stood before the painting, pawing at the wall beneath it and letting out short, sharp barks. "Loki? What's wrong, boy?" The golden retriever's tail was rigid, his ears forward as he continued to scratch at the wall. Rachel had never seen him act this way before. He was usually such a calm dog. "Maybe he sees a mouse," her son suggested, but Rachel shook her head. "In this solid brick wall?" Loki barked again, more insistently, then whined, looking back at Rachel with almost human concern in his brown eyes. It's okay, boy, she said, though a shiver ran down her spine. Come here. The dog hesitated, then padded over to her, still casting glances at the painting. Rachel laughed nervously, trying to shake off her unease. Great. Now even the dog thinks we should get rid of it. Her son packed up his homework, yawning. I'm heading to bed. Try not to let Aunt Judgmental get to you, okay? Rachel kissed his forehead. Good night, honey. Later, after her son had gone upstairs, Rachel sat alone in the dimly lit living room. The painting seemed different in the shadows, the waves darker, more turbulent than she remembered. Loki lay at her feet, occasionally lifting his head to growl softly at the seascape. What do you see, boy? She whispered, but the dog only shuffled closer to her legs. With a sigh, Rachel reached for the lamp switch. The room plunged into darkness, moonlight, casting strange patterns through the windows. As she stood to head upstairs, Loki moved deliberately to the space beneath the painting, circling once before curling up directly under it. His eyes remained fixed on the frame above, as if standing guard. Rachel paused in the doorway, watching her dog's protective vigil. Despite her sister's mockery, despite Loki's strange behavior, she knew the painting belonged here. What she couldn't know was why her faithful companion seemed so determined to watch over it. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Rachel fumbled with the coffee maker, still groggy from a restless night. The morning quiet was broken only by the gentle gurgle of brewing coffee and the scrape of her son's cereal spoon against his bowl. The peaceful moment didn't last long. Loki's sharp bark echoed through the house, making Rachel jump and nearly spill coffee grounds across the counter. Loki, she called out, steadying her hands. What has gotten into you? Another bark answered her, followed by the clicking of nails on hardwood as Loki paced in the living room. Rachel exchanged a worried look with her son. He's been weird since last night, her son said around a mouthful of cereal. Maybe the painting's haunted. Don't talk with your mouth full, Rachel replied automatically, though her eyes drifted toward the living room. And don't be silly. It's just an old painting. But Loki's barking grew more insistent. Rachel poured her coffee with shaking hands, the ceramic mug clinking against the counter as she set it down harder than intended. The dog's behavior was starting to fray her already stretched nerves. I'd better check on him before the neighbors complain, she sighed, walking into the living room. Loki stood directly beneath the painting, his tail straight and rigid, nose pointed upward as he barked at the seascape. Loki, enough. Rachel's voice came out sharper than intended, stress and lack of sleep making her tone harsh. The golden retriever whined but didn't move from his spot. Her son appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. Mom, I've got to go. Basketball practice before school, remember? Of course, honey. Rachel managed a distracted smile. Have a good day. After the front door clicked shut, Rachel stood staring at the painting that had caused so much commotion. The morning light caught the canvas differently than the evening shadows had, highlighting brushstrokes she hadn't noticed before. Something about the texture seemed odd. Fine, she muttered, reaching for the frame. Let's see what's got you so worked up, boy. The painting was heavier than she expected as she lifted it from the wall hooks. Loki's tail began wagging frantically, and he circled her legs as she carried it to the kitchen table, where the light was better. Rachel ran her fingers over the canvas surface, feeling slight ridges beneath the paint that didn't match the visible brushstrokes. She turned the painting over, examining the aged wooden frame and the brittle backing paper. Loki didn't waste any time. He reared up, placing his front paws on the table's edge, and began scratching at the frame's corner where the backing paper had already started to peel. Loki, no. Rachel tried to push him away, but not before his claws caught the loose edge, tearing a strip of the backing paper away with a dry, crackling sound. Rachel froze, horrified at the damage, then leaned closer, squinting at what the torn paper had revealed. There, in the space between the canvas and the frame, she could see the edge of something else. Something that looked like paper? What in the world? She whispered. With trembling fingers, Rachel carefully peeled back more of the backing paper. Her heart pounded as she revealed what appeared to be an old piece of parchment, yellowed with age but clearly marked with ink lines. Loki's tail thumped against the floor as Rachel gently worked the hidden document free. It was a sketch, detailed and precise, showing a stretch of coastline she didn't recognize. The lines were faded but still clear enough to make out rocky cliffs, deep coves, and what appeared to be depth measurements marked in fathoms. It's a map, she breathed, hardly daring to believe what she was seeing. Loki woofed softly, as if in agreement. Rachel carried the painting to the window, holding it up to the bright morning light. The sun streaming through the canvas revealed more hidden details, ghostly outlines she hadn't noticed before. There, amid the painted waves, she could make out the shape of a small island, its rocky shores matching the coastline in the hidden sketch. And perched atop the highest point, barely visible beneath layers of paint, was the distinct outline of a house. Her fingers traced the secret shapes beneath the paint, mind racing with questions. Why would someone hide a map inside an old painting? What was the significance of that lonely house on its rocky island perch? The mysteries tugged at her thoughts, making her grandmother's attachment to the painting take on new meaning. Rachel lowered the painting slowly, her expression shifting from shocked disbelief to determined curiosity. Her sister's mocking words from the previous evening echoed in her mind, but now they seemed hollow, meaningless. This worthless old painting had been hiding secrets all along, secrets that Loki's strange behavior had helped uncover. She placed the painting carefully on the table, the hidden map secure beside it, and stared at both while absently stroking Loki's head. The dog sat contentedly at her feet now, his earlier agitation gone as if his mission had been accomplished. Rachel studied the mysterious outlines revealed by the sunlight, each detail firing her imagination and strengthening her resolve to understand exactly what her grandmother's beloved painting had been concealing all these years. The afternoon sun sparkled on the water as Rachel pulled into the small marina parking lot. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she stared at the rows of bobbing boats. Was she really going to do this? The hidden map had consumed her thoughts for days, until she couldn't resist investigating further. Loki whined from the back seat, pressing his wet nose against the window. He seemed to sense her nervousness, but his tail wagged with excitement. "Okay, boy," Rachel said, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." Tom was already waiting by his weathered blue rowboat, hands stuffed in the pockets of his faded denim jacket. His eyebrows rose as Rachel got out of her car. "You sure about this, Rach?" he asked, watching her clip Loki's leash. The forecast mentioned choppy waters later. Rachel nodded, trying to project more confidence than she felt. "I'll be careful. Besides, I won't go far." She patted the waterproof bag containing the painting and map. "I just need to check something." Tom shrugged, handing her the old wooden oars. "Life jackets are under the seat. Make sure you both wear them." He bent down to scratch Loki's ears. "Keep an eye on her, buddy." The rowboat creaked as Rachel helped Loki climb in, his claws clicking against the wooden boards. She secured his leash to a metal ring on one of the seats, making sure he had enough slack to move comfortably but couldn't jump overboard. "Thanks again, Tom," she called as she pushed off from the dock. "I'll have it back in a couple of hours." The first few minutes were wobbly as Rachel found her rowing rhythm. Her arms protested. It had been years since she'd done this. Loki sat alert in the bow, his golden fur ruffling in the salt breeze as he watched seabirds wheel overhead. As they moved further from shore, the waves grew choppier. Rachel's stomach lurched with each swell, but she pressed on, periodically checking the coastline against the hidden map she'd memorized. The familiar curve of the bay stretched out before her, rocky cliffs rising from the water just as they appeared in the painting. "Look, Loki," she said, pointing with one oar. "See that formation that looks like a sleeping bear? It's right there in the painting too." The dog barked in response, causing the boat to rock. Rachel gripped the oars tighter, her palms sweating despite the cool air. The wind was picking up, making each stroke harder. Doubt crept in. Maybe Tom had been right about the weather. But then she saw it. Rising from the waves about a quarter-mile ahead was a small rocky island, its limestone cliffs jutting dramatically from the churning water. And there, perched precariously near the top, stood a house. Rachel's heart jumped. The structure was real, though far more decrepit than its painted version. Weather-grade boards hung at odd angles from the frame. Most of the windows were broken, and part of the roof had caved in. But it was unmistakably the same house from the painting. Loki began barking frantically, straining against his leash toward the island. The boat rocked dangerously as he moved, water splashing over the sides. "Easy, boy," Rachel called, but her own voice shook with excitement. She adjusted her course, fighting the waves to draw closer to the mysterious island. The house seemed to grow more ominous as they approached. Dark windows stared down at them like empty eyes. A broken porch railing swayed in the wind. The whole structure looked ready to slide right off its rocky perch into the sea. Rachel's arms burned as she maneuvered the boat through the choppy water, trying to find a safe approach to the island. Loki's barking grew more urgent, his whole body trembling with excitement or anxiety, she couldn't tell which. A particularly large wave lifted the bow, making Rachel gasp. She pulled hard on the oars, struggling to keep the small craft steady. Water splashed over the sides, soaking her jeans. Loki whined, pressing against her legs. When she finally got the boat under control, Rachel sat still. For a moment, heart pounding as she stared up at the abandoned house. It looked exactly like the faint outline she'd seen beneath the painting's layers of paint. The same steep roof, the same oddly placed chimney, even the small window in the gable, though now the glass was long gone. "It's real," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the lapping waves. "It's actually real." Loki whined again, pawing at the bottom of the boat. The old boards creaked ominously beneath them as another wave rocked their small craft. Rachel gripped the oars tightly, her mind racing with questions. What secrets had her grandmother known about this place? Why hide its location in an old painting? And most importantly, what would she find if she managed to get inside? The house loomed above them, its weather-beaten walls holding decades of secrets, waiting to be discovered. Rachel's hands trembled as she carried the painting into her kitchen, setting it carefully on the wooden table under the bright overhead light. Loki followed close at her heels, his nails clicking against the linoleum floor. Outside, the late evening sky had turned a deep purple gray, and a cool breeze rustled the curtains through the open window. "Okay, let's see what we've got here," she murmured, running her fingers along the worn wooden frame. The painting seemed heavier than it should be, considering its modest size. Loki sat beside her chair, his brown eyes fixed intently on her movements. Rachel retrieved her reading glasses from the counter and examined the frame more closely. Years of dust had settled into the grooves, and the wood itself was dark with age. Several small nails held the canvas in place. One by one, she worked them free with a butter knife, placing each tiny nail carefully in a small dish. "Look at this, boy," she said to Loki, pointing to where the backing was slightly warped. "Something's definitely not right here." The dog whined softly, pressing his nose against the frame's edge. Rachel smiled, scratching behind his ears. "You knew all along, didn't you? That's why you kept barking at it." With delicate fingers, she began separating the canvas from its wooden backing. The material was stiff with age, crackling slightly as she worked. A musty smell rose from the space between, the scent of secrets long hidden away. "Easy does it," she whispered, more to herself than to Loki. The last thing she wanted was to damage whatever might be concealed inside. Her grandmother had treasured this painting, and now Rachel understood why. It wasn't about the artwork itself. It was about what it protected. Thunder rumbled in the distance as she finally lifted the canvas free. Loki's ears perked up at the sound, but his attention remained fixed on the frame in Rachel's hands. There, tucked into the space between the backing and the canvas, was something that made her breath catch. A yellowed envelope, folded carefully to fit the narrow space. Rachel's hands shook as she extracted it. The paper was delicate, threatening to crumble at the creases. She could make out faint writing on the outside, though the ink had faded to a pale brown over the decades. "To M," she read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. Loki pushed his cold nose against her arm, making her jump. "M," she repeated, looking down at her faithful companion. "Margaret. My grandmother's name was Margaret." With trembling fingers, she carefully unfolded the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in neat handwriting. The letter was dated June 15th, 1944. Rachel's heart pounded as she began to read. "My dearest M, the war calls me away sooner than expected. By the time you read this, I'll be somewhere across the ocean. Know that every moment we shared at the house on the cliff remains treasured in my heart. Our promise is left safe until love or family claims it. You'll understand when the time is right. The painting will show the way, just as it showed us our special place. Keep faith, my darling. If God willing, I'll return to you. Forever yours, Thomas." Rachel read the words again, then a third time. Her grandmother had never mentioned anyone named Thomas, nor had she spoken of any wartime romance. Yet here was proof of both, hidden away for nearly 80 years. "The house on the cliff," Rachel whispered. "The one we saw today, Loki. That must be where they met." The dog lifted his head from where he'd been resting it on her lap, his brown eyes seeming to understand. Outside, another rumble of thunder shook the windows, closer this time. The wind had picked up, making the curtains dance wildly. Rachel smoothed the letter on the table, studying the careful penmanship. Had Thomas survived the war? Had he ever returned to her grandmother? And what was this promise he mentioned? The kitchen lights flickered as lightning flashed outside. Loki pressed closer to her legs, always nervous during storms. Rachel absently stroked his soft fur, her mind racing with questions. Her grandmother had kept this secret all these years, hiding it in plain sight in a painting everyone else dismissed as worthless. Even after her death, she'd made sure it found its way to Rachel. But why? Rain began to patter against the windows, slowly at first, then with increasing intensity. The storm was moving in quickly now, matching Rachel's growing sense of urgency. Something important was hidden in that old house on the cliff, something her grandmother had wanted her to find. Loki whined softly as another crack of thunder boomed overhead. Rachel clutched the letter close, feeling an unexpected connection to her grandmother's hidden past. Outside, the storm raged on, its wild energy reflecting the tumult of emotions stirring in Rachel's heart. In her lap, Loki's warm presence provided comfort as always, while the precious letter in her hands offered a tantalizing glimpse into a love story long forgotten, or perhaps just waiting to be rediscovered. The morning sun painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, washing away any trace of last night's storm. Rachel stood at her kitchen counter, methodically packing her backpack. Her hands moved with purpose, but her mind wandered to the letter hidden safely in her jacket pocket. Let's see. Sandwiches? Check. Flashlight with fresh batteries? Check. She spoke aloud, ticking off items on her mental list. Loki watched her intently from his spot by the door, tail wagging whenever she glanced his way. Water bottles, work gloves, first aid kit. The weather report promised clear skies, perfect for exploring. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant to find that letter, meant to uncover whatever secret lay waiting in that old house on the cliff. Tom's blue rowboat bobbed gently at the dock when they arrived. Rachel secured her backpack and helped Loki aboard, his paws landing surely on the wooden planks. He'd grown more comfortable on the water since yesterday's adventure. Ready, boy? Rachel settled onto the bench and gripped the oars. Loki barked once in response, his eager eyes fixed on the distant island. The morning air was crisp and clean after the storm. Seabirds wheeled overhead as Rachel pulled steadily through the calm waters. The exercise warmed her muscles, chasing away the early morning chill. She found herself following the same path as yesterday, using the landmarks from the painting as her guide. The island looked different in the morning light, less mysterious, but somehow more forbidding. The old house perched on its rocky throne like a forgotten sentinel, its weather-beaten walls gray against the brightening sky. Rachel secured the boat to a gnarled tree trunk near the shore, then helped Loki scramble onto the rocky beach. Her boots crunched on wet gravel as she began the climb up the narrow path to the house. Up close, the building's deterioration was even more apparent. Paint peeled from the clapboards in long strips, and several windows gaped empty, their glass long since shattered. The front porch sagged dangerously to one side. "Stay close, Loki," Rachel murmured, pulling on her work gloves. The dog pressed against her leg, unusually subdued. The front door was swollen in its frame, warped by decades of salt air and storms. Rachel threw her shoulder against it, once, twice. On the third try, it gave way with a protesting groan. Stale air rushed out, carrying the musty scent of abandonment. Rachel clicked on her flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. Dust motes danced in the light, stirred by their entrance. The floor was littered with debris, fallen plaster, rotting furniture, broken glass that crunched beneath her careful steps. "Hello?" she called out, more from instinct than expectation. Her voice echoed in the empty spaces, answered only by the distant cry of seabirds. The room must have been beautiful once. Faded wallpaper, its pattern barely visible, clung to the walls in patches. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, its mantle thick with dust and cobwebs. Rachel imagined her grandmother here, young and in love, waiting for her soldier to return. Loki moved cautiously beside her as they explored the first floor. Every step was accompanied by the creak and groan of ancient floorboards. The kitchen still held the ghost of domesticity, rusted pots hanging from hooks, cabinet doors hanging askew on broken hinges. "Careful, boy," Rachel warned as Loki sniffed at something in the corner. She played her flashlight beam around the room, looking for what? Some sign of the promise mentioned in Thomas's letter? They moved into what must have been a sitting room. Here, the deterioration was most evident. A section of the roof had partially collapsed, allowing a shaft of morning sunlight to illuminate the decay. Rachel stepped forward, drawn by something glinting in the light. The floor gave way with shocking suddenness. Rachel had just enough time to gasp before she was falling. There was a moment of weightlessness, then impact, not as hard as she'd feared, but enough to drive the breath from her lungs. Above, Loki barked frantically. "I'm okay," she called up, coughing in the thick dust. "Stay there, Loki." She'd fallen perhaps 8 feet, landing in what appeared to be a root cellar or storage space beneath the house. Her flashlight had survived the fall, rolling to a stop nearby. Rachel retrieved it, wincing at the scrapes on her palms despite the gloves. The beam revealed rough stone walls and dirt floor. Old shelves lined one wall, their contents long since rotted away. But it was what sat in the corner that made Rachel's heart skip a beat. A wooden chest, about the size of a small trunk, its brass fittings green with age. "Loki?" she called up to the worried dog. "I found something." The chest wasn't locked. The lid creaked as Rachel lifted it, revealing contents that had been protected from the elements for decades. Her hands trembled as she lifted out the first bundle. Letters, dozens of them, tied carefully with faded ribbon. The paper was yellowed but intact. Rachel untied one bundle with reverent care, unfolding the top letter. The handwriting matched the letter from the painting. "My dearest Margaret," she read aloud, her voice thick with emotion. "Today's mission was called off due to weather, giving me a chance to write. I dream of our days together in the house on the cliff." Bundle after bundle emerged from the chest, each representing months of correspondence. Thomas had written faithfully throughout his deployment, pouring his heart onto these pages for Rachel's grandmother. Sunlight streamed through the hole in the floor above, catching dust motes and creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. Rachel cradled the letters, overwhelmed by the weight of the love story she held in her hands. Above, Loki's soft whine echoed her own emotions. These precious words had waited patiently, for decades, preserved in their wooden sanctuary, waiting for the right person to discover them. Rachel felt tears welling in her eyes as she thought of her grandmother, young Margaret, reading these same letters by lamplight, hoping and praying for her soldier's safe return. Afternoon sunlight streamed through Rachel's kitchen windows, casting warm rectangles across her wooden table. She had cleared the entire surface, laying out bundles of letters in neat chronological rows based on their postmarks. The rich scent of coffee filled the air. She knew she'd need the caffeine to focus on the task ahead. Loki sprawled beneath the table, his gentle snores providing a soothing backdrop to her work. Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the first letter, dated June 15, 1943. The paper was delicate, requiring careful handling. She'd already placed cotton gloves beside her, remembering advice from historical programs about handling aged documents. "Dear Margaret," she read softly, "the training is brutal, but thoughts of you keep me going. Every night, I close my eyes and see your face as it was that last evening at the house, illuminated by sunset, more beautiful than any painting I could ever create." Rachel paused, sipping her coffee. David Carter had been an artist then. That explained the painting's origin. She continued reading, losing herself in his words. Letter after letter revealed the depth of David's devotion. He wrote about simple things. "The taste of army coffee, terrible. The sound of boots on gravel, reminds me of our walks. The sight of birds migrating, flying home, like I will someday." But beneath these observations ran a current of desperate love and growing uncertainty. A letter from October 3, 1943 caught her attention. "My dearest Margaret, the reality of war weighs heavily tonight. Johnson didn't make it back from patrol. Before we shipped out, he showed me pictures of his baby girl. She'll never know her father now. It makes me think of our future, of the children we might have. I've made arrangements, my love. If anything happens to me, look to the house by the sea. What I've left there is meant for you, and someday, for those who come after." Rachel's throat tightened. She glanced at the next letter's date, a gap of 3 weeks. Each subsequent letter carried more weight, more urgency. David wrote about his paintings, his plans, his hopes for their life together. But he also wrote increasingly about arrangements he'd made, precautions taken. By early 1944, his letters held a different tone. "The invasion is coming, we all feel it. They don't tell us when or where, but there's electricity in the air. Promise me you'll remember our special place, Margaret. Everything I am, everything I have, it's yours. Look carefully in the house where we spent those golden days. What you find there will provide for you, and for our family's future." Loki stirred beneath the table, whimpering softly in his sleep. Rachel reached down to scratch his ears, grateful for his comforting presence. The stack of unread letters seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. The final letter was dated June 3, 1944. 3 days before D-Day, Rachel realized with a start. The handwriting was rushed, but still beautiful. My Margaret, we move out tomorrow. I don't know where, but I know why. To make a world safe for love like ours. Remember what I told you about the house. Remember that my heart is yours, always. I will come back to you. But if I don't. The letter ended there. Rachel sat back, wiping tears from her cheeks. She needed to know more. The town library was housed in a brick building that dated back to the 19th century. Rachel parked her car and hurried inside, the manila envelope containing the most important letters clutched to her chest. The air conditioning hit her like a wall after the warm afternoon outside. Can I help you? The librarian at the reference desk looked up with a kind smile. Her name tag read Eleanor. I hope so. Rachel placed the envelope on the desk. I'm trying to research a soldier from World War II, David Carter. He was connected to my grandmother. Eleanor's eyes lit up. Military records? That's actually my specialty. We have extensive local archives, and I can access several databases. She gestured for Rachel to follow her to a computer station. For the next 2 hours, Eleanor proved to be an invaluable guide. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up service records, unit assignments, and deployment dates. David Carter, she murmured, scrolling through a document. Enlisted 1942, trained as a combat engineer, deployed to England in 43, and then, she paused, her expression softening. What is it? Rachel leaned closer. He was reported missing in action on June 7, 1944. In Normandy. Eleanor's voice was gentle. His unit was part of the second wave at Omaha Beach. They took heavy casualties. Rachel sank into her chair. One day after D-Day. All those letters, all that love and hope, ended in the cold waters off France. Was he ever found? Eleanor shook her head, already typing again. No, but look at this. He received a posthumous Bronze Star. The citation mentions heroic actions saving several wounded men before he disappeared. They printed everything they could find, service records, unit histories, even a group photograph showing a handsome young man with artist hands and kind eyes. David Carter smiled out at Rachel across 79 years of history. Your grandmother, Eleanor said quietly as she helped organize the documents. She never married, did she? No. Rachel touched the photograph gently. She lived alone all her life. I never understood why, until now. The sun was setting as Rachel drove home, casting long shadows across the coastal road. The manila envelope of photocopied records sat on the passenger seat, but she didn't need to look at them anymore. The image of David was burned into her mind. The soldier artist who had loved her grandmother so completely that he tried to provide for her even after his death. Margaret had never spoken about David, had never shared the pain of losing him. Instead, she had lived quietly, surrounded by his paintings, keeping their love story locked away in her heart. Rachel gripped the steering wheel tighter, thinking of the house on the cliff, of David's hints about something hidden there. Whatever he had left for Margaret was still waiting, preserved by time and silence, waiting for someone to understand its significance. The golden light of sunset filled her car, reminiscent of the light in David's painting, the one that had started all of this. Rachel realized that she wasn't just uncovering a lost love story. She was understanding her grandmother for the first time. Margaret hadn't been simply a quiet, independent woman. She had been a keeper of secrets, the guardian of a love that had survived war, time, and death itself. The morning fog rolled thick across the docks, wrapping the fishing boats in gray silk. Rachel pulled her jacket tighter, grateful she'd thought to bring coffee in a thermos. Loki padded beside her, his collar jingling softly in the early quiet. The wooden planks creaked beneath their feet as they made their way past rows of weathered vessels. A few fishermen were already at work, mostly older men checking nets or hauling supplies. Rachel approached the nearest one, clearing her throat. Excuse me? I'm wondering if anyone here might know about the old house on Carter's Island? The man shook his head without looking up from his nets. 2 others gave similar responses, though one mentioned that old Jonah might know something. He'd been working these docks longer than anyone. They found Jonah at the end of the pier, a stooped figure in a navy peacoat that had seen better days. White hair poked out from under his wool cap, and his beard was neatly trimmed despite his otherwise weathered appearance. He was checking the moorings on a small fishing boat painted a faded blue. Excuse me? Rachel called out. Are you Jonah? He turned slowly, pale blue eyes sharp despite his age. Depends who's asking. His voice was gruff, but not unkind. I'm Rachel Williams. Margaret Foster was my grandmother. She watched his expression carefully. I'm trying to learn about David Carter and the house on the island. Jonah's weather-beaten face showed a flicker of recognition. He straightened up, studying her intently. Margaret's girl's girl, are you? He glanced at Loki, who wagged his tail hopefully. Got somewhere we can sit? These old knees aren't what they used to be. They settled on a wooden bench overlooking the harbor. Rachel poured coffee into the thermos cap for Jonah, who accepted it with a nod of thanks. I knew them both, he said finally, staring out at the water. I was just a boy then, helping my father with his boat. David Carter was a good man. Artist. Used to paint right here on the docks sometimes. He took a sip of coffee. When the war came, he enlisted like most of the young men. But before he left, he asked my father and me for help. Rachel leaned forward. Help with what? Messages. Letters mostly, at first. See, David had bought that island and the house before the war, meant to fix it up proper. But once he was deployed, he worried about getting letters to Margaret through regular mail. War censors and all that. Jonah's eyes grew distant with memory. So he'd send packages to me and my father. Regular things, books, art supplies, that sort of thing. But there'd be letters hidden inside. We'd take them to Margaret. Loki settled at Rachel's feet as she processed this. So you helped them stay in touch? Jonah nodded. Wasn't just letters after a while. Sometimes, there'd be small paintings, sketches. David had a way of hiding messages in his art. Said if anything happened to him, everything important would be in the paintings. He glanced at Rachel. Found something in one of them, did you? Rachel told him about discovering the hidden map in the seascape painting. Jonah listened intently, nodding as if confirming something to himself. That sounds like David's work all right. He was clever that way. Said he wanted to make sure Margaret would be taken care of, no matter what. The old fisherman's voice grew softer. Last time I saw him, just before he shipped out for England, he mentioned something about legal papers. A deed, I think it was. Rachel's heart skipped. A deed? To what? The island house, I expect. Said he'd hidden it somewhere safe, where it would be found when the time was right. In case of my return, he told me. Or if not, her children's. Jonah shook his head slowly. After we got word he was missing, that house just stood there empty. Margaret wouldn't go near it. Think it hurt her too much. But you're saying there might be legal documents hidden there. Something that proves ownership? Could be. David was thorough about such things. Said he'd made sure everything was proper and legal. Just needed to be found. Jonah turned to look at her directly. That house has been standing empty for 79 years, but something was always meant to be found there. Maybe you're the one meant to find it. They talked for another hour, Jonah sharing memories of David's paintings, of Margaret's quiet strength, of messages hidden in hollow book spines and false bottoms of art supply boxes. Each detail helped fill in the picture of a love story that had never really ended, just waited silently for decades. As the morning fog began to lift, Rachel thanked Jonah and made her way back to Tom's borrowed rowboat. Loki jumped in eagerly, settling in the bow as Rachel untied the mooring rope. The water was calm today, barely a ripple disturbing the surface as she rowed toward home. The revelation about the deed turned everything she discovered into something more concrete. This wasn't just a romantic mystery anymore. It was potentially legal proof of inheritance. Rachel looked at Loki, who was enjoying the sea breeze, his ears flapping gently. If this is true, she whispered to him, that house. It's ours. Loki barked once in response, the sound carrying clearly across the still morning water. The evening light filtered through Rachel's living room windows, casting long shadows across the wooden chest that now sat prominently on her coffee table. She had arranged the letters carefully, some still in their original envelopes, others gently unfolded to reveal their precious contents. Loki lay nearby, his watchful eyes never leaving the chest. Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she heard her sister's car pull into the driveway. She'd called them over, hoping that showing them the actual evidence would help them understand. Make them see this wasn't just some wild fantasy she'd conjured up. Well, this better be good, her sister announced as she walked in, her husband trailing behind with his usual quiet demeanor. We were in the middle of dinner. Rachel took a deep breath. I want to show you what I found. She gestured to the chest and the arranged letters. Remember that painting you laughed at? Well, It led me to something incredible. Her sister's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose as she perched on the edge of the sofa. Oh, don't tell me you're still on about that old thing. Just look, Rachel insisted, picking up one of the letters. These are from a soldier named David Carter to Grandma Margaret during World War II. He owned that island house I told you about, and there might be legal documents hidden there that… Legal documents? Her sister interrupted with a sharp laugh. Rachel, honey, you're not seriously believing in some hidden treasure story, are you? You're not 12 anymore. Rachel's brother-in-law picked up one of the letters, his eyes scanning the yellowed paper with an unreadable expression. These look pretty old, he admitted. They are old, Rachel said eagerly, grateful for even this small acknowledgement. And look at this one, it mentions the house specifically. She reached for another letter, reading aloud. My dearest M, the house by the sea waits for us. Even if fate keeps me here in France, know that everything is prepared. What's meant for you will find its way home. Her sister rolled her eyes. So some soldier wrote love letters to Grandma. That doesn't mean anything legal. You're building this whole fantasy around some old paper and a rundown shack. It's not fantasy, Rachel protested, her voice rising. I've talked to people who knew them. An old fisherman named Jonah confirmed everything. David Carter was real, and he left something important in that house. Oh, so now you're taking the word of random old men at the dock? Her sister's tone dripped with condescension. Rachel, this is exactly why Mom and Dad worried about you after the divorce. You get these ideas. The word stung like a physical blow. Rachel felt tears threatening but forced them back. I'm not making this up. These letters are real. The house is real. And there's more to find. I know it. Of course you do, her sister sighed, standing up. I need to use the bathroom. Try to come back to reality while I'm gone, okay? Rachel watched her sister leave the room, then turned to her brother-in-law who was still holding one of the letters. You can see I'm not imagining this, right? He shrugged uncomfortably, setting the letter down. I should check on your sister. He left Rachel alone with the chest and letters, his footsteps oddly quiet on the carpeted hallway. Loki growled softly, and Rachel heard the distinct sound of a phone camera clicking. She stood quickly, but by the time she reached the doorway, her sister was already emerging from the hallway, phone in hand. Well, this has been interesting, her sister said, gathering her purse. But we really should get going. Early meeting tomorrow. You don't believe me at all, do you? Rachel asked quietly. Sweetie, I believe you believe it. That's what worries me. Her sister patted her arm condescendingly. Maybe take a break from all this treasure hunting? After they left, Rachel sat alone with the chest, running her fingers over the worn wood. Loki came over and rested his head on her knee, offering silent comfort. They think I'm crazy, she whispered to him. But we know the truth, don't we? She couldn't sleep that night, troubled by her sister's dismissal and something else she couldn't quite name, a nagging worry at the edge of her consciousness. When she finally drifted off, it was with Loki stationed protectively near the chest. The morning light brought her worst fears to life. Rachel walked into her living room and stopped dead. The chest was gone. The space where it had sat on the coffee table was empty, save for a few scattered papers that had fallen to the floor. No, she breathed, rushing forward. No, no, no. She searched frantically around the room, behind furniture, under tables, anywhere the chest might have somehow been moved. Loki followed her, whining anxiously as she grew more desperate. With shaking hands, she called her sister. Where is it? She demanded as soon as her sister answered. Where's what? The innocence in her sister's voice sounded rehearsed. The chest. The letters. They're gone. And you're the only ones who knew about them. Rachel, calm down. Are you saying you lost your box of old papers? Don't. Rachel's voice broke. Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about. You took them, didn't you? You and your husband? I think you need to rest, her sister said smoothly. Maybe talk to someone professional about these paranoid accusations? Rachel hung up, angry tears streaming down her face. She sank to the floor beside the coffee table, her whole body shaking with fury and betrayal. All those precious letters, David's words to her grandmother, the possible clues to the house's ownership, gone. Loki padded over to her, nosing at her tear-stained cheeks. Then he moved to the front door, pawing at it insistently while looking back at her. What is it, boy? Rachel wiped her eyes. He pawed the door again, harder this time, giving a short bark. Rachel stared at him, understanding slowly dawning through her grief. The island, whatever was hidden in the house, the legal documents Jonah had mentioned, might still be there. The chest and letters were gone, but the house itself remained. Loki whimpered at the empty spot where the chest had stood, then returned to scratch at the door with renewed urgency, as if trying to tell her their search wasn't over yet. Through her tears, Rachel watched her faithful companion's determination, his steadfast belief that they weren't finished, that there was still hope to be found across the water, in a house that had kept its secrets for nearly 8 decades. The pre-dawn air hung heavy with mist as Rachel pushed Tom's old blue rowboat into the gentle waves. Her arms ached from yesterday's rowing, but determination pushed through the pain. Loki hopped in eagerly, his tail wagging as she secured his leash to the wooden seat. "Ready, boy?" she whispered, settling onto the worn bench and gripping the oars. The morning sky painted everything in shades of gray and silver, with the island barely visible through the ethereal haze. Each pull of the oars sent ripples across the glassy surface, disturbing the perfect stillness. Rachel's mind churned with anger at her sister's betrayal, but she channeled that emotion into every stroke. The stolen chest had taken David's letters, yes, but something in her gut told her there was more to find. The old fisherman's words echoed in her head. Something was always meant to be found there. Loki stood at attention in the bow, his nose twitching as they drew closer to the island. The abandoned house emerged from the mist like a ghost, its weathered boards and broken windows even more haunting in the early light. Rachel guided the boat to the rocky shore, securing it well above the tide line. "Stay close," she told Loki as she unclipped his leash. He bounded ahead, seemingly unafraid of the creaking structure. Rachel followed more cautiously, her flashlight beam cutting through the grayness. The house's interior felt different in the dawn light. Dust motes danced in the pale rays that filtered through the broken roof, and the air smelled of salt and rotting wood. Rachel stepped carefully around the hole in the floor where she'd fallen before, scanning the walls and ceiling with renewed purpose. Loki paced restlessly, moving from room to room as Rachel examined every corner. She tested floorboards, tapped walls, and studied the exposed beams overhead. Hours passed as the sun climbed higher, warming the house's damp interior. "There has to be something else," she muttered, wiping sweat from her forehead. She'd brought a small ladder this time, and carefully climbed it to inspect the rafters. The wooden beams were thick with cobwebs and decades of grime. Suddenly, Loki's urgent barking echoed through the house. Rachel hurried down the ladder, following his excited sounds to what must have been a bedroom. Loki stood on his hind legs, front paws braced against a massive support beam that ran along the ceiling. His claws scraped frantically at the wood. "What is it, boy? What did you find?" Rachel raised her flashlight, studying the beam where Loki was scratching. The wood looked different there, newer perhaps, or at least less weathered than the surrounding area. She grabbed her ladder and positioned it carefully, heart pounding as she climbed up for a closer look. The beam segment was about 3 feet long, and when she knocked on it, the sound was hollow compared to the rest. With trembling hands, she pulled out the multi-tool she'd brought and began carefully prying at the edges where Loki had scratched. A small panel of wood, cunningly fitted, began to work loose. Rachel held her breath as she eased it free, revealing a dark space within the beam. Loki whined excitedly below her. "Please," she whispered, reaching into the cavity. Her fingers touched something wrapped in thick, waxy fabric. Carefully, she drew it out. A flat, rectangular package about 2 feet wide, wrapped thoroughly in oilskin cloth and tied with faded twine. Rachel climbed down, laying the package gently on a relatively clean patch of floor. Loki crowded close, his tail wagging furiously as she began untying the knots. The oilskin had protected whatever was inside remarkably well, still supple after all these years. As she folded back the last layer of protective covering, Rachel's hands began to shake. Colors emerged, rich oils preserved perfectly by their careful wrapping. She sat back on her heels, a soft gasp escaping her lips as the full image was revealed. It was a portrait, masterfully painted, of a young woman with familiar eyes and a gentle smile. She wore a simple blue dress, and her dark hair was styled in the fashion of the 1940s. But it was her expression that caught Rachel's breath, a look of such love and hope that it seemed to radiate from the canvas. "Grandma Margaret," Rachel whispered, touching the edge of the frame reverently. She recognized her grandmother's features, though she'd never seen her this young. The artist had captured something special, not just her appearance, but her spirit, her very essence. In the bottom corner, in careful strokes, was the signature, David Carter, 1944. Rachel sat in the dusty room, holding the portrait as tears slid down her cheeks. This was how David had seen her grandmother. Young, beautiful, full of life and promise. He'd preserved that image here, protected it from time itself, waiting for someone to find it. Loki pressed against her side, offering comfort as she studied every detail of the painting. The skill was undeniable. David had been a true artist. But more than that, his love for Margaret shone through every brushstroke, every subtle shade and shadow. The morning light streamed through the broken windows, falling across the portrait and bringing the colors to vivid life. Rachel could almost feel David's presence in that moment, his dedication in creating this tribute to the woman he loved, his care in hiding it away until it could be found. The portrait was more than just a painting. It was a testament to a love that had endured beyond war, beyond time, beyond death itself. And now, at last, it had found its way home. Rachel sat cross-legged on the dusty wooden floor, her hands still trembling as they held the portrait. Sunlight streamed through the broken windows, dancing across the oils that David Carter had so lovingly applied nearly 80 years ago. Loki settled beside her, his warm presence steadying her racing heart. "It's so beautiful," she whispered, carefully turning the frame over in her hands. The craftsmanship of the frame itself caught her attention. Sturdy oak, expertly joined at the corners. Unlike the painting's original frame in her living room, this one seemed custom-made, its edges still crisp despite the decades. As she examined the backing, she noticed something odd. The wooden panel wasn't simply nailed in place. It had been carefully fitted with small brass catches at the corners. Her fingers found them easily, as if they'd been designed to be found. "He wanted someone to open this," Rachel murmured. Loki's tail thumped against the floor as she carefully released each catch. The backing came away smoothly, revealing another layer of oilskin wrapping. This one folded precisely to protect what lay beneath. Her hands shook harder as she unfolded the waxy fabric. Inside was a stack of papers, the typewritten text still clear and sharp on the yellowed pages. The first page bore an official letterhead from a law office in town, one that still existed, though under a different name now. "Last Will and Testament of David Michael Carter," Rachel read aloud, her voice catching. "Dated April 15, 1944. She scanned the formal language, legal terms swimming before her eyes until she reached the critical passage. Her breath caught as she read, "I, David Michael Carter, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath my entire property on Harbor Island, including the house and all surrounding acreage as recorded in the county deed books, to Margaret Ann Wilson and her descendants in perpetuity. This transfer is to take effect immediately, upon confirmation of my death in service, or after a period of 10 years following the end of current hostilities if no such confirmation is received." Rachel's hands were shaking so badly now that she had to set the document down. There were more pages, surveys, property descriptions, bank documents, all carefully preserved. David had thought of everything, ensuring the gift would be legally sound even decades later. He knew, she whispered to Loki, who watched her with understanding brown eyes. He knew he might not come back, so he made sure she'd have this place, that we would have it. The document was complete, bearing not only David's signature but those of multiple witnesses and a notary public. He'd done everything properly, creating an unbreakable legal chain. Even her sister couldn't dispute this. Rachel gathered the papers carefully, wrapping them back in their protective covering before securing the backing of the portrait frame. She stood slowly, legs stiff from sitting on the hard floor, and looked around the abandoned room with new eyes. This wasn't just some derelict building. It was her inheritance, a gift of love passed down through time. The sun was beginning to rise as she made her way back to the rowboat, Loki trotting faithfully at her heel. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. She secured the portrait carefully in the boat, making sure it couldn't shift during the journey home. As she rowed across the calm morning waters, Rachel held the portrait between her knees, unwilling to let it out of her direct contact even for a moment. Each pull of the oars brought her closer to home, the weight of what she'd discovered settling into her heart. Loki sat in the bow, his fur ruffling in the gentle breeze, occasionally turning to check on her as if making sure she was all right. The eastern sky blazed with orange and pink as Rachel finally tied up at the dock. Her arms ached from rowing, and exhaustion pulled at her limbs, but she cradled the portrait carefully against her chest as she made her way home. Loki stayed close, matching his pace to her tired steps. Inside her house, Rachel sank into her favorite chair, still holding the portrait. Tears began sliding down her cheeks, not tears of sadness or frustration this time, but of relief and wonder. Loki patted over and gently rested his head on the frame, his warm eyes fixed on her face. The morning sun spilled through her windows, catching the oils in the portrait and making them glow. Her grandmother's young face seemed to shine with an inner light, as if sharing in Rachel's joy at finally bringing her lost love's gift home. In that moment, as dawn painted her living room in shades of gold, Rachel felt the weight of generations of love surrounding her. David's devotion, Margaret's patience, and her own determination all woven together in a tapestry of family and fate. Rachel's hands trembled as she laid out the documents on Eleanor's desk at the county records office. The historian adjusted her reading glasses, carefully, examining the portrait and deed with professional scrutiny. "The paper stock is certainly period appropriate," Eleanor murmured, running her fingers along the edges. "And these watermarks." She pulled out a magnifying glass, studying the official seals. "They match our archive documents from 1944 perfectly." Eleanor made several calls, cross-referencing property records and legal registries. With each confirmation, Rachel's heart beat faster. After 2 hours of meticulous verification, Eleanor looked up with a warm smile. "It's absolutely genuine, Rachel. Every detail checks out. David Carter owned this property outright, and he legally transferred it to your grandmother and her descendants." She squeezed Rachel's hand. "The house and island are yours." The news spread through town like wildfire. Rachel's sister showed up at her door that evening, face flushed with embarrassment. The chest of letters appeared on Rachel's porch the next morning, with a hastily scrawled note of apology. "I guess we were wrong," her sister admitted stiffly when Rachel confronted her. "About everything. The painting wasn't worthless after all." Rachel's son, who had been quietly watching these developments unfold, found her in the kitchen that evening. He'd been examining the portrait of his great-grandmother, tracing the careful brushstrokes with wondering fingers. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm sorry I made fun of the old painting before." He looked up at her, his eyes bright with emotion. "This is actually pretty amazing. We have this whole family history we never knew about, and you figured it out." He wrapped his arms around her in a tight hug. "I'm really proud you're my mom, and I'm proud of our family." Rachel held him close, her heart full. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered into his hair. "That means everything to me." The next morning, Rachel loaded her truck with basic supplies: hammers, nails, work gloves, and cleaning materials. Loki jumped eagerly into the passenger seat, tail wagging as if he knew exactly where they were headed. As she drove toward the island, the rising sun painted the sky in shades of promise. The old house might be damaged, but it wasn't beyond saving. Just like the love story it had sheltered, it just needed someone to believe in it enough to bring it back to life. Rachel parked near the dock, already mentally cataloging repairs and renovations. With determination in her step and Loki at her side, she grabbed her toolbox. It was time to make this house a home again. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fresh paint and new beginnings through the island house's gleaming windows. Rachel walked through the main room with her son and Loki, running her fingers along the smooth, newly repaired walls. Sunlight streamed through clean window panes, catching dust motes that danced in the air like tiny stars. "It's hard to believe this is the same place," her son said, admiring their handiwork. The rotting floorboards had been replaced, the sagging roof repaired, and every surface scrubbed until it shone. Loki trotted happily across the polished wooden floors, his nails clicking against the boards that no longer creaked. The original seascape painting hung above the stone fireplace, its colors seeming brighter now, as if sharing in the house's revival. Rachel stood back, studying the familiar brushstrokes that had started their incredible journey. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "this house was built with love. It deserves to keep helping people find hope." She turned to her son. "I've been thinking about turning it into a retreat." "What kind of retreat?" he asked, settling into one of the new cushioned chairs they'd brought over. "For single mothers who need a fresh start. A place where they can come to heal, plan their future, find their strength." Rachel smiled, thinking of her own struggles as a single mother. David gave his life protecting others, and Grandma Margaret kept this place safe for us. It feels right to pass that gift forward. The community's response exceeded her wildest hopes. Local businesses donated furniture and supplies. Women from church groups offered to coordinate meals and childcare. Even Rachel's sister, humbled by recent events, volunteered to help with paperwork and scheduling. They named it the Carter House Haven, and within weeks, the first mother and her children arrived, carrying little more than hope and determination, just as Rachel once had. As the sun began to set, Rachel sat on the wide porch with her son. Loki lay at their feet, his tail thumping contentedly against the wooden planks. The waves below caught the golden light, transforming the water into sheets of shimmering copper. Through the window, they could see the seascape painting glowing in the evening light, its hidden map now a symbol of something far greater than buried treasure. "Mom," her son said quietly, "I can't believe we almost got rid of that painting." Rachel watched the colors dance across the water, thinking of David and Margaret, of love letters and secret promises, of faith rewarded and hope renewed. "It was never worthless," she whispered, wrapping an arm around her son's shoulders. "It was waiting for us." If even one moment stayed with you, hit subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story written gently for the heart.